Well, the storm system continues to chug along here in the Northeast, and we've got a variety of winter storm warnings, lake effect, snow advisories, and even a blizzard warning for Erie County. Wind advisories are still up. They're going to come down at 10 o'clock tonight, and then we can start thinking ahead to moderating temperatures over the weekend and into next week. So let's get going here on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And if you'd like to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, you can do it simply by using the Amazon referral link and do your Amazon holiday shopping via that referral link. It's at the top of the chat board or on the descriptor to this podcast. You get your stuff. Amazon throws us back a little bit of coin, and that's because we sent you there, and we appreciate very much your support of the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And with us tonight is the future member of the Raccoon National Cemetery in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Woo! 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 I want to thank Joe for sending me this. I found this in my mailbox today, and it was quite a surprise. But I was one of these, and now I've got one.
Well, I was out around and about this weekend doing bits of shopping, and I came across those raccoon hats, and I thought, Rayo, honeymooners, perfect match. So there you got it.
It was perfect.
You will be You'll be the envy of your neighborhood.
Yes, I know.
And if you walk around like that long enough, you'll probably be followed by other creatures.
We have had a few raccoons in the vicinity in the years that I've been up here, and in fact, one raccoon about 20 years ago woke us up. He was on our porch, and he had a empty peanut butter jar. He was banging it on the deck, trying to figure out how he can get the top off and get the last little bit of peanut butter that was inside the jar.
They're very clever.
Yes, they are.
They're very clever. They figure things out. Squirrels are like that too.
Yes.
Which I always called squirrels were rodents with PR.
And the thing that I was happy to see this morning, Joe, is that the warnings or advisories that we were giving yesterday or last night came to fruition. There were quite a few school delays, even a couple of school closings, one up in New Paltz. And we had anticipated that was going to be the case because, well, it was going to be a situation where there was a little bit of light snow, but it was still very slick and slippery. And oh my goodness, I see somebody on who's just signed on.
Yeah,
he's the one and only.
He's here. The man was.
I doffed my raccoon cap for you. Cap.
My new hire. This is my new hire.
Your new hire. All right, everybody. We got Tolleris on tonight. I don't know about you. The southern living is getting me used to the warmer weather, so that when it gets down to 20, well, not down to 17 yet.
It was pretty cold
yesterday morning. Well, you don't know the story. I went out on a fishing boat yesterday morning. So
right.
You haven't lived until you're on a fishing boat going 40 miles an hour if for 2 miles. It's the longest 6 or 7 minutes of your life at a temperature of 17. And the wind is blowing in your face. It was brutal. It was utterly brutal.
But I'm sure it was.
I caught.
Well, it was a lake in Georgia.
Lake Nottely, yeah.
Yeah.
Here in North Georgia, fishing for stripers. Right. I went out with 2 of my buddies. We caught 7 stripers in 4 hours, which was fine. And I had a nice battle with one of them on a light rod with 15-pound tests, and it was great. So anyway, that was my life. Dave Tolleris, ladies and gentlemen, fresh from Chesterfield, Virginia.
Yeah, God's snowiness. That's right, baby. So
all right.
Where it never snows.
Well, yeah, you live in
So
a snow hole over there. It's amazing how stuff goes
uh,
around you.
it's really remarkable. In many ways, it makes me think after all these years that things are normal in the universe. When I start getting snow, when things are getting really crazy. So as long as the snow keeps missing me, that's the important point.
All right. Speaking of which, Mr. Rayo, you were just talking about um, the some of the snowfall overnight. I was a little, we were matching up some of the models last night, their snow maps going into last night, and I
How
mean,
did it work out?
it actually worked out pretty well. And in a few places, there were actually some places on Long Island that kind of surprised me a little bit. Um, but there were a few places even on Long Island that got an inch or two. It was very uneven.
Right.
If you were, it suddenly went from like nothing, and then you go into Nassau County, there was a coating to maybe an inch or two, but there were pockets that didn't see very much. Same happened in Suffolk County as well. And, also in the inland spots, it was very blotchy. I think there were some spots in northwest Jersey that got a few inches. But overall, it was more than I thought. And in Connecticut, I noticed that there were a few places along and north of Route 84 that got at least a few inches there.
Well, but were there any icing problems, Joe? Mr. Rayo, you talked about before any icing or slick problems? People forgot we're not ready for it. You remember we talked about that the other night?
Well, I'm not sure if they were not ready for it. Of course, people who were watching us last night were prepared, but as I just mentioned a few moments ago, there were a few schools that had delayed openings, and also there were a couple of, one of them was New Paltz, north of me, that actually closed the schools today. They had about 3 inches up there, and you say to yourself, well, why would they do that? Right? It's 3 inches, such a small amount, but it was, it's near the beginning of the season. It was also
Yeah.
a slick and slippery. It's not, now my driveway was not covered with snow, but it was kind of slush coating. And as I'm walking my dog, we're going down this. My driveway is on a bit of a hill or a bit of a slope, and I'm telling my dog, he's running or trotting, and I'm saying stop,
Yeah.
stop, because if he makes any false move, I'm going to go, and next thing you know, I'm
Yeah.
on my tush. So it was that kind of a morning, and I'm sure on some untreated roadways it was a little slick and slippery.
Yeah, they got to keep it. It's mostly because of the lawyers these days and litigation and stuff, so they have to do it. But better safe than sorry. So
Do you, David, do you have your maps ready to go, or do you need some time
I
to set up?
do, I
You do.
do.
Okay, so I mean, we could. I'll leave it up to I'm always very cordial to our guests. Okay,
Yeah,
so
whatever.
I'll leave. So I
Yeah.
will. So I will leave it up to you. Would you like to go first, or do you want us to? We can go through the current weather first, and you tell me.
Well, it would seem to me to make sense meteorologically speaking to go with the current stuff first, and then we'll switch to the longer range.
All right,
So
let's let's do
So
that. Let's.
you guys do that stuff, and then when you were ready, and then we go to the swing stuff and take a look at, what I essentially I put out my weather video yesterday, and I made my final winter forecast, and I'm pretty bullish about this winter. And the European model came out this morning. The climate one shows no La Nina at all for this winter. So
Right.
we'll get to that. So let's do the next 2 weeks, and then we'll go on from there.
All right. So, Stim, hold on to your hat, Mr. Rayo. We've got uh, we still have endless lake effect snow warnings up for southwestern New York and northwestern Pennsylvania and a couple of counties in northeast Ohio. There's a blizzard warning up for Erie County, which is probably no surprise. I mean, they must be pushing 50 or 60 inches by now. Winter storm warnings for a handful of counties in west central Pennsylvania. We've got winter storm warnings up for central and north central New York, winter weather advisories for western New York, as well as around the Catskills. I think I saw Chuck Cardillo message me earlier today because he's 3,000 feet up in the Catskills there with he got about 4 inches. And again, those wind advisories. Although I was looking at the wind obs, I'm really surprised that Joe, the gradient was tight. Now, I mean, but I'm looking at some of these wind gusts. I really didn't see anything crazy. they're mostly like 25 to 30. It just seems like it didn't mix down.
Yeah,
Well,
I was wondering. I was saying to myself, all right, they've got the wind advisory posted from 6 o'clock in the morning, but I personally said to myself that it wouldn't be until about noon or 1 o'clock that we'd really start seeing the strong gusts because the upper trough, there was no teleconnection between the upper trough and the surface lower the surface level winds. I figured when they got together, that's when we would see, a real burst of strong winds. But you're right. It is nothing, out of the. It wasn't really anything extraordinary in terms of strong. I mean, it was gusty, but it was certainly nothing like what had been advertised for 50 and even some cases 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts. It was a moderately blustery kind of day out there today, and it will continue that way a bit for the overnight hours tonight.
It's cold in the southeast because I'm 28 here, and it was 40 degrees at didn't get above 40 today. And, well, I take that back. It was about 44, 45 this morning, and then the
what's your elevation, Joe?
2200 ish.
Okay.
So we were like mid 40s this morning. We had rain overnight last night, and then the winds kicked in. Temperatures actually settled, were falling most of this afternoon. So at 4 o'clock it was 40, and now shortly before 8 o'clock, it is 28 here in Northeast Georgia, in Blairsville. Not much happening across the country other than the fact that it's cold in the east and not so cold in the west. Just every day this week, it's just been fog advisories and also freeze fog advisories in the uh, bluish green counties that you see up in north central Oregon. And on the satellite loop, our storm system is chugging along here. This is for a clipper, this wound up being uh, pretty robust in terms of its size and its scope. Usually, these clippers, you get these little lows that run along and they just sort of drop southeast or east, and they don't really produce very much. This one well, I guess we could just call it you know, a high end type clipper system that just took advantage of the dynamics and developed into a rather robust little storm.
It was a kicker. Definitely had strength to it, and no doubt about that. Even though it stayed north, the core of it stayed north of the Great Lakes. It was a kicker,
Right.
and a lot of energy with it. There's no doubt about that. Also, a part of it is, if you look at the pattern, we have that ridge on the west coast of Canada, right? So it's coming down towards Sault Ste. Marie and Watertown, New York, and towards Montreal. So in order to make that turn, it almost has to develop a little bit of a negative tilt, which is
Right.
short wave when the strong wind coming in. So I mean, if you look at the pressure, we got down to what 998 or something. It was pretty strong for Clipper.
Yeah, it
So
was. We've got some Gulf moisture building up in East Texas and into Louisiana. That could be setting up for some rain across the deep south over the weekend and into next week. Much of the plains on the quiet side, a little bit of a disturbance coming down through the Dakotas right now. And that is really nothing, much to speak of there. Most of the west and southwest quiet, a little bit of precip coming into the Pacific Northwest. We still have snow going on up I-81 into from Binghamton all the way up to north central New York, and that's going to continue for a while tonight. Also seeing some snow showers and some heavier snow showers in parts of northern Vermont and also some patchy snows in down East Maine. We've got some streamers coming in off of Lake Erie around Cleveland at the moment and going southeast from there. And western Michigan, which has been some of the areas in western Michigan and also the upper peninsula of Michigan have had winter storm warnings up for 3 days now. Well, they're starting to get whittled away a bit, but we still have a few in that particular area. Precip wise, over the next, when you melt it all down, if it's required to be melted down, depending on where you are, over the next 7 days, uh, pretty much from Maine, from the St. Lawrence Valley, southwestward, down the Appalachians, you've got a big area of inch and a half to 2.5, 3 inch rainfall amounts being indicated for Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, even pushing up into Tennessee. We also have an 1.5-inch stripe that runs up through eastern North Carolina and eastern Virginia, up the coast of New Jersey to about New York City and points east, and also for the coastal southern and coastal New England, southeast and southern New England. And there's even a 2.5-inch stripe that goes over Cape Cod. With the dry conditions overall, at least we keep putting these little dents into the precip deficit, and that's a good thing. And also seeing some robust precip for the Pacific Northwest coast of Washington and for Oregon. So, just for you, I'm going to go with the European because I thought today's runs, Dave, were a little strange in some respects, um, and I'm not 100% sure which model has maybe the better picture here, but obviously across the United States, the weather looks fairly calm for Friday. We've got this cold high settles down in the Gulf states. We're going to eventually see that move out to the east. There's another clipper coming down to the northern lakes Saturday night. Looks like a bit of a
Right.
almost like a warm front to some
Yep.
extent.
Yep. Yep.
And it has some snow showers during Saturday night as far south as northern New Jersey and just over Long Island and points north and northwest from there. And of course, that goes by. Winds go westerly. We start to warm up, and then we've got energy coming up from the Gulf. Some energy up in the northern plains.
Yep. Here comes the wet
So
pattern.
here comes. So you get there's this arm of rain that comes through on Monday, then that goes out, and then there's another wave that's going to come up.
Right.
That's a little more robust.
Yep.
And that looks for some rain later Tuesday night, and Wednesday. Just a little surprised at how cold the European is after that wave and front go by. I mean, it's pushing 504 thicknesses down into southern
Yes.
Kentucky. I'm a little suspect of that. I'm not sure where what your position is on this.
I think it's a little overdone, but it's been doing it for a couple of days. It's been showing a big blast for a couple of days. It's not so, and it doesn't last. But if you get a cold blast in the middle of supposedly a warm pattern, that's not the worst thing in the world.
No, and to argue the fact that it's probably overdone, if you look at the GFS in comparison, where the Europeans got a 510 thickness, the GFS has a 534. I mean, it's got a chilly push behind it, but nowhere near as cold as the European does. So I'm just wondering,
Right.
the argument to me is that if we're in a warm pattern, I mean, and obviously this is whatever the operational run is now with the European, because they use one of the control models. So I just,
Yeah.
I'm a little suspect of that. And then after that, it doesn't look like there's much in the way of deliveries of cold air coming down out of Canada into mid-month, with maybe another rain event, if you want to, use this literally, around the 19th or the 20th. So it looks like we got a pretty solid 10-day stretch, almost 2 weeks worth of cold weather
Yes.
from Thanksgiving through this week and maybe a little bit beyond that. And now we're going to be sort of switching over to some sort of, I don't know, I'm thinking it's transitional, that whatever we change into is going to be transitional pattern before we get into something that maybe is the primary pattern for the winter months. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. It's going to change the last week of December, in my view. In fact, if you go out, you look at 360 GFS European, the 18Z is much more amplified, like the European is, with a much stronger ridge. It clearly shows the pattern reloading and rebuilding, and the warm pattern coming to an end. You can clearly see that at 360 and 380. So on the GFS and the European, the ensemble. So I think that's correct. There's a lot of reasons why I think that's going to happen. So if you want me to do my stuff there, I'll put them up.
Yeah.
My how do I do that? There, go to shares.
Just a second. You may now share your heart out.
Okay, let's see here. So,
Redistributionist that you are.
yes. Okay, so let me go here. Let me go to my first one. Okay, and then just see here if I can open it with photos. Let's see if that works.
You should be
Come
able
on.
to by pulling it up on your screen. You should be able to do it.
Yeah, okay, that's what I want to see here. And let's see here. Okay, so that's what I want to see here.
Right now, we want to see it.
Yes, okay, so now I have to post it up there, and then that's too much. We have to shrink this down a little bit. Okay, so
You know, you
and now I
can't.
have to share screen.
There you go.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
You can't push an artist. You have to.
Technology, ladies and gentlemen, technology at work.
All right. So what we're seeing here is the MJO projections. This is the GFS and the CFS. And
All right. The MJO, for those who might not know,
it's the Mathian-Julian oscillation.
Right.
And what it is, this has been around for about 20, 25 years. And it's actually the buildup of convection along the Indian Ocean, along the equator. And what happens is it moves from west to east along the equator, from the Indian Ocean over Singapore, just north through Indonesia, north of Australia, and then towards south of Hawaii, towards Peru. And as it moves along that track, it's divided up into 8 different sections. And each section has implications for the overall pattern in North America, as well as Australia and South America and China and the Pacific and Africa. It's a very powerful global oscillation type of feature. Now, of course, it all changes because it could be whatever the weather, let's say phase 5 gives you a certain type of weather pattern in the month of December. Well, it may give you something totally different in the month of May. So it's constantly changing. So one of the things you have to do when you're dealing with S2S, which is what I deal with, sub-seasonal, week to week, you have to keep track of the MJO things. So what this does is this gives us a general idea of how the pattern's going to evolve. Okay, and so what we're looking at here is the GFS is on the left-hand side, the CFS is on the right-hand side. And the black lines is where it has been. And the red line is the next 5 days. The blue line is the 6 to 10 day. And the purple line is 11 to 15 and 16 to 20 day. So if we look at these values here, you'll see that by the time we get to the end of December, which is December 30th, January 1, the MJO has moved into phase 7, right? Now, in the short term, it moves into phase 5 and phase 6. And we'll get to that in just a second, what that means. This is the European. Now, the European earlier was taking it into the neutral circle, but now the new one of the European...
Dave, can you make that bigger?
Sure. Let me see if I try that. Is that bigger? There you go.
Yeah, if you could make it a little bigger, that'd be great. I mean, that's, beautiful. Oh, what a guy.
There you go. So there it goes. Now you can see stay neutral circle. So that circle in the middle is the neutral circle. And the way this works is that the closer the lines are into the circle, the weaker it is. And once it goes into the circle, it means that the MJO is going to sleep and taking a rest. On the other hand, the further it is to the edge of the diagram, the stronger it is. So, for example, in the previous diagram, you can see that when it gets into phase 6 and 7, it's in the middle of the diagram. So it's a fairly strong, robust MJO, which means that it has a much bigger impact on the pattern than a weaker signal. So that's what's going on here. Now, like we mentioned, the European is doing this. Now here it's fairly close to the circle, but it's getting stronger. And notice that many of the lines, the yellow lines, are much stronger away from the circle, much like we saw with the GFS and the CFS. So that's a good sign by the time we get to the end of December, beginning of January. Now, what does phase 6 look like? Well, you showed the maps with the trough on the East Coast for the next 10 days. I'm on the West Coast for the next 10 days, right? Once we get past this weekend. Well, that's what happens in phase 6. Independent of any model, this is what the pattern has done whenever we've had a phase 6 in the month of December where we have neutral ENSO conditions. You see the bottom of the diagram, neutral ENSO, no La Nina, no El Nino. That it always produces a strong trough on the West Coast and a ridge on the East Coast. So what we do is, what the idea here is to find out, weather models are goofy. Sometimes they show this, sometimes they show that. So this independently confirms what the weather model is doing. So you have the pattern which says trough on the West Coast, big ridge on the eastern United States, and then you have the models which show that. The two things match, and we go, yeah, it's a good forecast. That's a high confidence forecast. So that's what phase 6 does. This is how we use the MJO. Now, obviously, you've looked at this. This is the extended stuff, day 10. This is from yesterday. And you can see, look at the trough here approaching the west coast of North America and the ridge developing and building over the Midwest and the plains in the east. This is a mild pattern. And of course, the other issue is, look at that polar vortex to the north. You see how it's shaped like a football running west to east?
Right.
Whenever you have that, that means the cold air is stuck up in Canada. You need the polar vortex to be coming south, not running west to east like somebody's throwing a football. You don't want it to look like a spiral. That's not what you want to see. Okay, right. So this is a mild pattern for the time being. We know that. Now this is day 10. Day 15 on the GFS and the European. Look at the ridge amplifying on the west coast again. Look at the pattern, the trough beginning to shift back towards the east coast here. The polar vortex is now shaped north to south. So now this isn't a really cold pattern, but it's December 20th. It's a step in the right direction on both of these models.
By the way, that PV
now,
is
the
is
European.
That,
excuse me.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to just ask you the PV,
yes?
The polar vortex you're referring to. Are you referring to the PV in the stratosphere?
Well, actually, it's the one at the mid levels. It's not the strat.
Okay, all right. I just wanted
it's
to
the one
ask
at the mid levels at 500.
Right. Okay.
Sure. So there's your quality, the Baffin, the Hudson's Bay low, and it's beginning to, it's still fairly strong, but we are seeing a trough trying to reform towards the eastern United States. So again, this is December 20th, and the point here is that, for snow lovers not to jump off the bridge because it's going to get warm in the middle of December. Now, this is phase 7. Remember, we talked about what does it look like at phase 7 when it gets into phase 7. Well, if it does at the end of January, at the end of December in January, this is what the overall pattern looks like. Now, notice we're getting blocking showing up in the Arctic region. We have a negative anomaly in southeastern Canada, and we're getting some kind of flow out of Canada into the central eastern U.S. This isn't a severely cold pattern, but it's not mild either. This phase 7 is like a transition pattern. So, okay, that's not too bad going towards Christmas. That's not awful. Now, the other issue is, okay, we can look, this is from Tomerberg. You see the lower right corner there. This is a plot of the winds around the polar vortex out to January 1st, the first week of January. So we have different color lines here, and the dashed black line is the average. So when the winds around the polar vortex at 10 millibars at the top of the atmosphere, almost when you're getting into the tropopause, it's strong. All those lines on the left-hand side in December 1st, December 10th, way above the dashed black line. That means the polar vortex is very strong and it's positive and it's not going to come south at all. All the Arctic air is trapped up there. Okay, it means you're not going to get a sudden stratospheric warming event. But look what happens by the time we get to December 25, December 30th. The lines are going down. They're approaching the mean, the average. This tells us that the polar vortex is weakening as we go towards the end of the month. And that means potentially a stratospheric warming event, the polar vortex splitting into different branches, and you get all sorts of potential storminess down the road. That's the GFS. Here's the European. Okay, now there's more ensembles. It looks like a bunch of spaghetti. Again, look at the thick blue line, which is the ensemble mean, and it goes below the thick red line as we go into January. This shows a weakening of the vortex. Again, the left-hand side, look how strong the blue lines are way over on the left, way above the zero line, very strong winds. Now, by the time we get to January, the wind speeds are dropping, which indicates a weakening polar vortex, which is what you want to see in January, February, and March. Another diagram, somebody blow this one up, you can see it a little more. Okay, so here, there's the dashed black line is the forecast period from December 3rd, and look at the warming showing up here, okay, and the going on in the atmosphere at the high levels of the atmosphere, 10 millibars, 5 millibars, you can see the polar vortex is clearly weakening. That's what that is showing as we're going towards Christmas. Which is, what you want to see here. Now, this is important because here is November 30th. These are the sea surface temperatures across the globe. Area A is this huge pool of really warm water going from Japan and Manchuria through all the way into the central North Pacific. Area C is the cold water along the west coast of North America, which many of you may know as the negative PDO, the negative phase of the Pacific Decade Oscillation. When you have cold water there, usually you have a trough on the west coast and a ridge on the eastern United States, and that's not good for winter weather lovers in the eastern U.S. You want to see a ridge on the west coast, and the Rockies, not a trough. And then area B is the supposed La Nina that's trying to develop. Now, I superimposed a thick green line here to show you that there's a distinct split. The Western Pacific is incredibly warm, and the Eastern Pacific is incredibly cold. There's a very clear dichotomy here, almost a bipolar setup of the Pacific Basin. And what's happened is that research shows, I've talked to Eric Weber about this in North Carolina State, and other research papers show that when you have a westerly QBO, which is what we have now, okay, and a very warm Pacific Ocean, what happens is you end up getting a different type of weather pattern, okay, one which does not, and you have no La Nina. Those three things, you end up getting a very different weather pattern. And it's rare, and it causes a lot of problems, and it can lead to severe winter in the eastern United States. Now, this is the CFS, and I want to show you why this thing is just a piece of crap. I mean, here it is, November 14th. I mean, look at this. This is from November 14th. Look at the drop it has. Now, here, this is January, so this is December. Going into November, December, it has the ENSO region 3.4 plunging like somebody took a skydive off the cliffs in Mexico, all the way down to minus 1.25, minus 1.5 before we get to January. That's not happening. And let me show you. Let's look at the actual data. This is the trend, the 15-day moving trend. That blue line is a zero line for region 1.2. That's nowhere close to La Nina conditions. And this is 3.4. This is the big one. Again, now it's all below zero, but you need to get this line minus 0.5 for several weeks in a row to get La Nina. And as you can see, it's actually warmed up. That is not plunging. You're looking at the ENSO region trading slightly colder than normal, but it's not plunging into La Nina conditions at all. It just isn't doing it. So I don't know what the CFS is looking at. Now, this is the IRI Institute, came out last week, okay, at the end of November. This is 26 different climate models. Some of them are dynamic, some of them are statistical. The only model which has La Nina is the CFS.
When was the CFS? When was the CFS last run?
They run it every couple of days. They run it again today. Now, I looked at the data today, and today the CFS has started backing off of that big drop. It's backing off a little bit. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of days. But, I mean, you can see how it's clearly an outlier. There are a couple other models here which have borderline La Nina conditions, but clearly is an outlier. The thick red line is the mean of all the dynamic models. The thick green line is the mean of the statistical models. But you can clearly see they all, let me blow this up a little more. You can clearly see what's going on here. That's quite remarkable. The CFS is way off here. It's just off.
I want to. Joe Ray, you want to jump in? Joe, you want to jump in here?
No, I'm fascinated. I'm just hoping that this year it works out, because so many people on the chat board, Dave, are saying that what you were saying for last year never really.
It was a complete bust. Yeah. Last year, I argued that the MEI was off and it was going to cause a change in the El Nino, and that turned out to be completely wrong. And also, if you recall that in January, I admitted that I was going to be wrong, and I knew that the winter was a bust. So I don't, if I go with a certain idea and it turns out to be wrong, I have no problem coming out and saying I'm wrong. You have to change the forecast. The object to doing a weather forecast is not to blow smoke up my own butt. That's not what I do. Okay. People pay me money to tell them, okay, I was wrong. This is what I thought was going to happen. It's time to change the forecast so I can take a new position on the corn or the soybeans or what have you. So again, I don't have you can't ever be worried about saying you're wrong in the weather business. You have to be able to be very comfortable with it, move on to the next thing. Okay, you learn from it, you see what you got wrong, but that's what you have to do. So right now, there's absolutely, like I said, and the other piece here of information is this is from the IRI Institute, and you can see underlined in red here, the objective IRI model ENSO outlook indicates a continuation of neutral conditions through December, 53% chance. This is a notable difference between the probability outlooks from what we have and what the CPC is forecasting, which is still a 57% chance of La Nina. So they're quite a bit different. And here is the new European. This came out this morning. Okay, it comes out the 5th of every month. And the red line is the ensemble mean. And the blue color there is the minimal threshold criteria of La Nina. And as you can see, the red line barely reaches weak La Nina conditions in January for 1 month, and then it's over. And many of the lines are above that. So again, this tells me there's no La Nina, no effective La Nina.
I'm gonna take the screen for a second. I just went and pulled up the latest CFS run. Now this is the so this is from December. Hold on, I want to make sure I got this here correctly here. So this goes from December 26th
November 26th.
No, this one, the map that's up here now.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah, see it? So this is trying to. So this was at 18Z today. Okay. Yeah. So the map is valid from the 26th of December to the 2nd of January. And it has, you're back to the ridge in the west, developing ridge in the west, developing troughing in the east. Now, when we go to the next, so this is day 22 to 28. Go to day 20. Now we get to 29:35. So this is 2nd of January to the 9th of January. You've got a deeper trough in the east, stronger ridge in the west. And then you have this, which is from the 9th to the 16th of January, where you have this is a really cold look if this verifies.
Yes.
And that's week 6. So
yeah, that looks like the T&H pattern. Yes, that's what that looks like.
Okay, I just wanted to bring this up because the CFS is the can't forecast, and then the 4-letter word for doo-doo model.
I will say that pattern looks very clippy, if you will. It's the kind of pattern that seems to suggest that we'll have clippers coming on down from Western Canada and across. And again, if you can get one of these clippers to go far enough south and then move offshore, let's say at the Delmarva or even South Jersey, that gives you the idea that maybe it may intensify rapidly as it gets its feet wet, and you could end up with a fairly significant snowfall.
But also when that's kind of pattern, Joe, you have the Arctic front dropping way to the south, and then the front stalling in the jet stream because the front at that point is running west to east. The jet's running west, let's say across Tennessee or North Carolina or Georgia. Okay, so then you end up getting wave activity forming on the front. Okay, and you get overrunning. You don't get big nor'easters, but you get overrunning events that way.
Right.
So there is that possibility because in that kind of pattern, the front's going to go way to the south. I mean, it's not going to stop in Pennsylvania. That front's going to go down to Georgia or South Carolina or Bama or something.
Right. I just want to point out, because Adam Lowe says the CFS looked like that in the long range all last winter. Well, it didn't look quite like this, but it did have, was showing colder looks that never really materialized, and I will agree with that. But I would point out that the CFS has been showing it, basically warm for the next 4 months, and now it's suddenly starting to show, what it's showing now. Now it could still wind up being wrong. I'm not saying it's correct, but I just wanted to at least put that difference out there.
If the CFS is beginning to back off of the La Nina, that means the weekly models are going to start changing too. The two things are connected.
So there's 2 questions I want to pass. First of all, I'll give you the second question first because Izzy D would like to can you explain a little bit more what the TNH is?
Okay. Sure, I'm going to get to that 1 second. Yes.
And my question is, this is the La Nina that never comes. It
Right.
was supposed to come it was supposed to develop over the summer,
Yes.
and it hasn't happened.
Right.
So now that's gotten pushed back, and it's still, technically, not there at the
Right.
threshold that they want to see. So,
Right.
I mean, I'm just wondering why. I mean, in past years, when they've stated that there's a La Nina or an El Nino coming,
Right.
it happens. And
Right.
I'm wondering why it's different this time around, where the forecast for the La Nina seems to be failing. I mean, what
Yes.
else is going on that we're missing here?
I think it's the extremely warm Western Atlantic Ocean. I think it's so warm. Not the Western Atlantic, the Western Pacific is so incredibly warm that it's altering the La Nina here. That's what I think it is. But again, it was warm last year. A couple of years ago when we had the La Nina.
Right.
Also, I think maybe we're La Nina out, because if you look at this image here that I posted, this goes back to 1995. All right. And remember, so 23, 24 last year, we had this strong, almost super El Nino, not quite, but almost. All right. And you remember this column, you look at the middle of the column, you can see November, December, January, February, January, February, March. So you want to look at the middle columns here for the winter months. And then before that, 2021, 21, 22, 22, 23, we had a 3-year-long La Nina event.
Right.
3 years of it. So I think the ocean's kind of like, hey, give us a break. And now the other issue is, since in the last 30 years, we've only had 7 winters with neutral conditions. Think about this. Only 7 years, 7 winters in the last 30, how we had neutral conditions. That's really quite remarkable. If you go back to the beginning, and there are sites out there which can track the ENSO all the way back to before 1900. And you can see this is really uncommon. Now, the other issue is in the green boxes, look at the winters when you had neutral conditions. 96, 97 wasn't a horrible winter. 2001, 2002, well, that one did suck. Okay, grant you. 2003, 2004 was a good winter. 2012, 13, wow, good winter. 2013, 14, ooh, good winter. 2016, 17, a very nice winter. 2019, 20, arguably the last good winter we had on the East Coast.
Right.
So, just by keeping it neutral, you're in the ball game. Just by keeping it neutral.
Right. But I think 20 and 21 was also a neutral year, and that was a disaster.
No, 2021 was a raging La Nina.
Was it a raging La Nina in 2021?
Yep. Take a look at the data right here. Let me blow it up.
Sorry. My mind must be elsewhere. I used to remember these things a whole lot. No, I take your word for it.
Here's the data. It was raging La Nina.
Okay. So now I'm sorry. The TNH.
Yeah, let's get to that. Okay. So, all right. This is the TNH pattern. Now, it looks like a P&A, but it's not a P&A. For one thing, the positive anomaly, which is the red, is not on the West Coast. It's in the Eastern Pacific, south of Alaska, just below the British Columbia coast. And the other thing that happens is that the upper level 500 low that exists in Hudson's Bay, the quasi-polar vortex, is actually suppressed to the south, and it actually approaches the U.S.-Canada border. And you end up getting a southeast ridge, which is actually in Florida and the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. So let me show you another example of it. This is a comparison. Let me shrink this a little bit. You can see it. Here we go. This is a comparison between the P&A pattern on the left and the TNH pattern on the right. Now, notice the differences here. Okay. First, the vortex is much stronger on the TNH, and it comes much further south. Right. And it does that because the positive anomaly, instead of being in Western Canada, is now off the coast of California. And also, because of that, you're also getting more blocking in Alaska and up in Greenland with the pink colors there. So the TNH pattern is not common, as you can see. It happens much less than the positive P&A, but it does happen.
What TNH stands for? What? Tropical
Northern Hemisphere.
Okay, gotcha.
So there is a negative value to this as well. So that it's just there's a positive and a negative value to it as well. But this is the positive phase. And this is an example of when it happened. Let me shrink this a little bit. 2013-14. So the two maps, upper left, that's the 500 millibar. You can see the huge negative anomaly. Okay, there's one off the coast of Ireland, and another one that's the Eastern Atlantic pattern. And then the TNH, the vortex, was way far south. Look, it's south of Hudson's Bay, Canada. See that? It's south of Hudson's Bay. And then the ridge is depressed way off the Atlantic Ocean. And look at the 850 anomalies, incredibly low that winter. And then you can see this is the actual pattern, what it looked like at 500 millibars and 850. So there's that. And then the next one is, this to show you the winter, in case you forgot what it was like, the 2013-14 winter.
One of my favorites, by the way.
Okay. So that was a nice winter. Now, you look at that initially, you say, okay, well, it's pretty cold on the East Coast, cold in the Midwest, but this was March. Ooh. This is a classic, another example of how March is no longer a spring month. March is much more like February and December is much more like November. It's just the changing, shifting of the climate. And you can see that. This is another example of it. The number of times, when I first started doing the grain agricultural business, farmers used to get out in the fields all the time by the end of March, starting at field preparation and all sorts of stuff. No, they don't even start before the beginning of the baseball season now. They don't even bother because there's always cold and snow everywhere. So now this is 2014-15, except it started in January. December was actually mild 2014, but this is from January 1st to March 31. Look at that winter. Good googly moogly. Okay, that was a great winter as well. So again, both of these were positive TNH patterns with neutral conditions and a really warm Western Pacific conditions here. So, and lastly, I think my last couple here, this is the European Ensemble Weekly. This is January 1. And again, see the blue color there? That's the negative anomaly. See how it's dropping southward? Nice original West Coast. The trough axis is in the Mississippi Valley or the Ohio Valley. That's not horrible. You're getting some positive anomaly in Greenland. And then here we go. This is January 13th. Now, this is a long way out. I get that. But you see a very large negative anomaly across much of the upper Midwest and the upper plains, stretching all the way to New York State. This is a cold looking map, boys and girls. I don't know if that's going to be right, but again, that is the teenage pattern. So, all right, that's the presentation. What I think is going to happen. So I think we're headed for a positive TNA for this winter. I could be wrong. I could be completely full of, Tyrannosaurus feces, but that's how I see it. So,
very well put. Go on.
So that's what I'm going for it. So we'll see.
Well, I'll just tell you. Look, and I've been, I'm very open and honest about the fact that when it comes to long range stuff, I mean, it just what it makes my, I admire you, to be able to juggle all these technical factors going in and out, up and down, and all the rest of it. I've never been able to really get my head around it all. So I just kind of stick in the short and medium range and let the cards fall where they fall.
Well, the only way you get better at is doing it. I mean, that's why.
And I understand that.
This is why I don't chase tornadoes, because I think it's incredibly silly to do so. I know a lot of people like doing it. And I'd rather put my emphasis here than chasing tornadoes. But that's me. Everyone's different. So
I said this sort of being half serious, but on the other hand, I was somewhat serious about the fact that during October and November, when everybody was coming out, for the first time since I've been doing this online for 10 years, and the YouTube show's been around for 6. By the way, can you unshare that? Just this way we can all go full screen.
Yeah. Let me do stop sharing here.
So
there we are.
I mean, really, every year, my biggest complaint every year was that there is the biblical rule that you cannot forecast anything other than a cold and snowy winter in the Northeast, or you will be cast out into the abyss, and where there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. This was the first time going into this winter where the vast majority of forecasters were going for a warm winter and a relatively snowless winter in the eastern part of the United States. And I immediately, and I have witnesses, Joe will attest to it, just on the standpoint of being contrarian, the fact that everybody is on one side of the trade makes me want
Yeah,
to go look at the other side. And that's
right.
just on that basis,
Yeah.
because I've learned over my experience in the world of weather that um, the things that wind up happening, they happen in order to embarrass the most number of people. And this year, a cold, snowy winter would really embarrass a whole slew of long rangers. And I just want to put that out there.
Well, that's one possibility. Of course, my philosophy is that um, it's always see my personal philosophy is it's always about me. The entire universe revolves around me. So,
Well,
so
clearly,
if so, therefore, if it turns out to be wrong, it's just God trying to screw me over again. But that's just my philosophy. I could be wrong. So yeah, it's there. The other thing is seriously is that we've had 3 or 4 snowless winters for so long in the eastern United States. Okay, that people are just getting caught up into it and being skeptical, which is fine. You want to be skeptical, but there's a difference between skeptical and cynical. Okay,
Be
so
careful when you say that because while the folks in the snow belt areas have over the last 2 or 3 years had more snow than they know what to do with, when you
yes,
say that, you make sure you say along the I-95 corridor.
Florida.
yes, yeah, outside of the snow belt. But even the last couple of winters in the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, outside of the snow belt areas, they haven't gotten a lot. It's been a problem there as well. So yeah. Also, Izzy asked me a question in the chat there. I said about the QBO. Is it connected to the TNH? Yes, it is. And the TNH pattern only occurs when you have a westerly QBO. Okay, with a warm, really, really warm West Pacific pattern and no La Nina. So yes, that is yes. So usually a westerly
Crazy winter we
QBO.
had last year. Everybody gave up on the winter. Oh, this
Yeah.
is terrible winter. Let's move on to spring. And then look what happened the final 10 days of March. The
Boom.
parts of the Northeast got bombed with tremendous, I mean, not just snow, but I mean, like some places had like 1 to 2 feet, followed a few days later by another 1 to 2 feet. It was crazy, right up until almost the solar eclipse in early April. So, how do you explain something like
That's
that?
March for you. That's March for you. It's just March is just so interesting, such a crazy month. It's just no longer spring. It's just a continuation of winter, as far as I'm concerned.
Any thoughts on the warm Atlantic? Because you mentioned about the Pacific, but the
Yes.
Atlantic is absolutely on fire. And by the way, I'm just theorizing here, but um, the the snow that's fallen in the snow belts in the last 10 days or so. I wonder how I wonder the fact of the over the fact that the lake water temperatures are near
You're absolutely
all-time
huge.
highs. I mean, that's
Yes.
got to be playing a big role in the volume of snow that's being produced.
Yes, and over the past couple of years, because the lakes have been so warm, they are carrying extra warmth in them, and you get very heavy. The snow mounts become quite enhanced when you hit the Arctic air comes in. Yeah, I think that's going on. Like it happened last year and the year before, like Joe said, with the snow belts getting pounded because there's so much extra energy in the lakes with these warm seas with the warm lake temperatures anomalies. Yes, I think that's probably true. Absolutely. No. And also, if you get a chance, you take a look at the sea surface temperature maps from November 2013 and December 2013 and going into January 2014, you'll see that there was this huge pool of really warm water in the Northeast Pacific. And we're very close to seeing that warm water move from the
Right.
Central Pacific into the Northeast Pacific. And if that happens, then we're really going to get the TNH pattern. So,
Okay. So
yeah, that's where I
you're
stand on.
leading
That's my feasibility.
you're being you're being somewhat contrarian, which I have a lot of respect for contrarians because you're able to look at things and maybe not and see beyond the obvious. So I'm on your side with that. So you're taking a somewhat contrary position uh, with regards to where we're going this winter. Um, I'm,
The great
I,
George, the great George Patton, Joe, said it best. He said, "When everybody's thinking the same, someone isn't thinking."
no, but there's that is an incredibly true statement. It's true. You
Absolutely,
know, the
absolutely.
madness of crowds. You don't want to be on the same. You really when everybody's saying the same thing, that is always an alarm bell that should go off in your head, saying, "What are they missing?" Okay.
Well, the thing is that sometimes the consensus is right, whether it's weather or
Right.
politics or economics or what have you. But the point is that sometimes it's not, and you have to walk the line. You can't just be a contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. You have to find a reason to do it. And
Right.
sometimes the consensus is right. Sometimes there is no alternative to it, but sometimes there isn't. So you have to walk the line, because if you go too far the other way, then you become a cynic and you'd never change your data until you actually have a foot of snow on the ground. And then you have to go on TV and go, "Oops, sorry." Okay. Or
Or you
then
could
you end up
just
being
get,
the other way that says, "Okay, well,
or you could just
the hurricanes are
gaslight.
created by,
I'm sorry. Go
you
ahead.
end up the other way, people saying hurricanes are created by government agencies or something, though. So
Any
anyway,
ideas about the Central Plains? Because Miss Fowlerite on the chat board is a Central Plains
I,
person, so
I don't live there.
well, neither of us do. None of us do. But um,
Well,
if we have a scenario, as you envision, where troughing is mostly in the east, ridging is mostly in the west, the Central Plains would be kind of in a funny middle ground spot there.
yes, right. It would be. It's they have a moisture problem there now. They've had a very dry late summer and autumn. They have a serious, drought conditions in much of the upper plains. Areas in the western Dakotas, eastern Montana have been in drought 3 and drought 4 conditions. If you look at the drought monitor map, you would see that. So this pattern coming up, if they can, most of the rain that develops occurs east of the Mississippi River, so it really doesn't help them. But we'll see. I have to look at, it's not looking like a great moisture pattern for the next couple of weeks for the Plains region at all. A lot of change. They get warm, they get cold, they get warm, they get cold. So, very changeable conditions. But it's nothing I can see right now, which is going to bring them a lot of moisture over the next couple of weeks in this pattern.
All right. What a great way to finish the week.
Okay. Well, I'm glad it could help.
Well, David, you have a warm, welcoming home here. It comes complete with a working fireplace.
Yeah, I see that.
The flames. I've trained the flames to stand up and perfectly straight. There's my dog.
Yeah, bending the laws of physics. Yeah. So
yes,
I take it that's a screenshot behind your Zoom, right? That's not really it's.
Yes, it is a screenshot. Yes. My dog couldn't stand that. I have an Aussie Border Collie mix. He couldn't stand still like that if you tied him down and glued him to the floor. Trust me, there's no way. I don't think I've ever seen him stand that still for more than a second or two. So anyhow, Joe, you have any final, thoughts and questions before we say goodnight?
I think we'll just suspend Briller Jeopardy though for Sunday when we come back at 7:35 on Sunday evening.
Oh, somebody just asked. Well, Izzy D says, "Do you look at comments under your YouTube videos?"
Do I look at what?
Do you look at the comments that people post on your YouTube videos?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Depends how busy I get.
Okay.
So
He just asked the question. Anyway, I always look at mine. I try to answer them. I do the best I can. All right. What's that?
I just changed my background.
I know. What's with all the dinosaurs?
Why not? Who doesn't like dinosaurs?
I don't dislike dinosaurs. I don't like dinosaurs. I know a lot of people are into dinosaurs, but it's never been a thing for me.
It's weird. I can see on our Zoom, on the Zoom link up top here, Joe, I can see that he has a dinosaur background, but yet we're broadcasting, and what we're seeing on YouTube, or what our viewers are seeing on YouTube, is not that. They're seeing like a regular white background with
Oh
a.
no, I got the dinosaur background on it. I have the live feed on my other monitor. They can see the dinosaurs. You need to refresh your YouTube.
I'm doing that right now. What I'm seeing now is New York hospital stay, $25,000. Learn more at choose.va.gov. There we go.
Um,
You're right. You're right. Now I was
um,
able to refresh, and there you go.
all right, David. Thanks for coming on. Um,
All right, guys.
we'll have you. You know, when you
We'll do
break.
it again when it gets really interesting.
Yeah, when we get a big storm running around, we'll throw you on and we'll do some short range stuff and we'll have some fun.
Okay.
All right. All right, folks. Thanks for being here tonight.
All right.
Really
Sounds
appreciate
good,
it.
guys. Thanks for the opportunity. All right.
Oh, anytime. And for everybody watching tonight, thank you very much for being here. And of course, we got a nice weekend coming up, so we'll be back Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. Okay. So nighty night. Say good night, Joe.
Good night, folks.